The focus here is going to be on lamps, old lamps, but this holds for any subject. I'm just going to show you about lamps. I know nothing about lamps, zippo about lamps, nothing. I don't care about them. I don't source them, although I should, and so should you. I don't know anything about them. That's kind of been a topic I have considered I need to know something more about. I'm first, right at the moment, kind of trying to master all about dolls in fight because I'm always running across dolls, and I don't mean those old antique weird looking dolls. I'm talking about like Barbie dolls and things like that. I think we should each know more about those as far as from a sourcing standpoint. And I'm trying to create a little class for you on how to find those quickly without doing individual comps. And I also kind of have that same desire about lamps. So I've been kind of studying about lamps. Believe it or not, I don't know everything about everything. I know that's hard to believe. But what I don't know about, I know I need to learn about because every single time you and I go to a sale of any kind, thrift store, yard sale, estate sale, if we walk away with nothing or very few things, it almost always is our fault, not the sale. I know some sales are just duds, but it's often our fault because we just don't have a wide enough knowledge. Will we ever? No, probably not. I mean, there's always going to be, how can we know everything about everything? You know, an antique dealer works 35 years and she opens a store in 35 years and she still doesn't know a lot about everything. And so we never will. But that's kind of the fun part of this. And it's also kind of the money challenge. So about lamps, I was beginning to study. I actually did. We have one at my mom's house that I was kind of trying to learn more about. Fortunately, there I knew more about the time frame because it was there when I was a kid, so I knew it was mid-century. By the way, mid-century is a term you should put in a title for anything in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even very early 70s. That is a good keyword. Now, I would not sacrifice that for brand and all of the more important item specific keywords, but if you can put mid century in a title, two words, you can put a hyphen in there, but you don't have to. And it's almost always best not to use punctuation, but I don't think that that punctuation matters. But I would always use mid century, just a little tip in general for lamps or anything else. So lamps, here we go. I really haven't been excited about lamps. A burglar once stole the only lamp I had when I was single, and I guess I should have been upset, but I was just delighted. So, in looking for information on this lamp, I didn't know anything about how to find it. And so I thought, well, I'll use eBay's image search. You go and you do a search and you take a picture and you see what comes up. Nothing really came up. A lot of you know to use Google Lens. There's an app on your phone that you can download called Google Lens. And it's smarter than eBay's search, but it also, the nice thing about eBay search, if you can use it and you find something, then you're just automatically looking at comps. But Google Lens can find more things um, than eBay images or Amazon images. I still couldn't really find information about, I couldn't really match the lamp very well. So I did the next best thing. And the following is so obvious. I think a lot of you and I will forget this. I think we will forget this. This is a critical part of our skills. And it's so obvious that we forget to do it. And that is how to identify an old lamp. You just ask Google. Google knows everything. How do I identify an old lamp? That's all you do. And the wealth of information on how to source old lamps just blossoms. For instance, when you do that, you will see this sort of thing. And the first thing that comes up is fairly helpful, although some of it's kind of obvious, and that is Antique Lamp Supply recommends picking up the lamp and looking for a manufacturer's symbol, name, or date stamp embedded in the base. Yeah, that'd be nice. You know, but if there's a name or a brand, I don't know that we would really be thinking, wonder what brand this is. You know, we're going to be typing that brand into eBay looking for comps. But okay, this isn't all that helpful, but it does say a manufacturer's symbol. Some lamp makers have symbols. That's going to be harder for us to find, but it also gives us an idea that if, like jewelry, if we see some unique uh, embossed thing on the bottom of the lamp or on the sticker on the bottom of the lamp, on the plate, the metal plate on the bottom of the lamp, and we see some sort of a weird symbol, it's probably some sort of logo mark or a mark for a manufacturer. That is a clue we need to look into more. We can't just think, oh, for some reason there's this, weird picture here. Uh, the name or date stamp embedded in the base. That's good to know. There might be a date embedded in the base. So if a lamp says XYZ56 and it doesn't really turn out to be a model number, that 56 could very well be a big hint that that's when it was made, 1956. Just something to consider. You also can look on the thing that you turn, the black thing to turn on a lamp. That often will have a brand. It doesn't always match the lamp, and it could have been added later. They could have changed the on-off mechanism, but it's also a hint. Well, I'm actually getting ahead of myself, although we're almost done. Just use Google how to identify an old lamp. So if the image searches don't work, do this. How do I know what kind of lamp I have? I just like opening up these answers here. Lightly scratch the underside of the lamp surface. That bothers me, by the way, but to determine if the type of material. Some lamps appear to be made of metal, but they might be painted to look and feel like metal. Inspect the lampshade by pinching it between your thumb and index finger, and they're going to have more information at this website. I guess we should look at it. And they do. They have more, but I don't love this. But anyway, it tells us a little bit more. Unbeknownst to many, the value of a lamp's fittings and decorations can be more than the lamp itself. Interesting. So the lamp shade might be bad, or the little finial thing. The many lamp finials were made of bone. Cinnabar, I think that's Cinnabon's owner, Barbara. Many lamp finials were made of bone, cinnabar, ivory, jade, pink. All these materials are very expensive now. Old bulbs can be worth more than the lamp. Edison and early Western bulbs can fetch up to $1,000 for collectibles. Last but not least, don't forget about the shades. Some of the most iconic shades are made from iridescent Favreau glass and intricate glass mosaics, or as the Italians say, mosaic, as well as fabric and parchment. This is very interesting. You know what they're telling us? They are saying, like those appliances you part out, you might want to part out this lamp. The parts might be worth far more than the lamp, and you don't have to ship some big old giant lamp to get the money for it. You can just ship the little things and the lightweight shade and not ship the actual lamp. Maybe it by itself, after you remove all this stuff, isn't worth it. Interesting. Are you trying to identify an antique lamp by style? Well, yes, maybe we are, because if we know the style, we may want to put inside the listing, astral, argand, banquet lamp, Betty lamp, all of the stuff, Tiffany lamp. Most of us, I think, probably know what a Tiffany lamp is. Student lamp, you're talking about some kerosene lamps in here. But anyway, I doubt any of us in a store are going to find, lamps from the 17 and 1800s. We certainly could, but we probably won't most of the time. But maybe at a sale. But this is not really something I don't really think we will run across many of these at the places we shop, but 1600 lamp. But this is giving us an idea. Yeah, we should know the type. Even in the mid-century, there were types of lamps, and we may want to know what type of lamp we have. Let me go back to the Google. How can you tell if a vintage is lamp? Look for brush marks. Antique lamps should feature hand-painted designs. If it is painted, if there is a design, if there is, decorations of some kind, get your jewelry loop out and look at it and see if you see brush marks. That's the way you can get a hint. Remember from our painting class, that's the way you can get a hint as to whether you're looking at a print or an actual painting. Look for brush marks. We do the same thing on dinner plates, decorative dinner plates, and lamps, the bodies of the lamp. See if there are brush marks. That gives us a clue that it's an older lamp and they weren't just stamped out at a factory. What are the most valuable lamps? These would be good to maybe be familiar with. I mean, $1 million Salviati chandelier, whatever that is, maybe that's it. I don't know. But these also might be very old, like 1600s. I don't know, but that's interesting. How can you tell if a lamp is brass? Solid brass is not magnetic. If the magnet sticks, you should, in your little bag of tricks, carry a magnet. That's a possibility, and not just for lamps, but jewelry and other things. If the magnet sticks, it's usually steel or cast iron with a brass plating. If the magnet doesn't stick, you can further test by scratching a hidden area with a sharp tool. If you see a shiny yellow scratch, the item is likely solid brass. Brass lamps are valuable. This also tells us about brass in general. You might have a brass canister of some kind and you want to know, is this really brass or not? Well, the magnet trick rules it out. And if the magnet sticks, if the magnet does not stick, then it might be brass. You might want to do this, maybe, underneath on a real small place, scratch it with a key or something and see if you see a shiny yellow scratch. It's solid brass. That means the brass goes all the way through. And so the outside of the brass will be a little tarnished, but when you scratch it, you're going to see the pure, untarnished, unaged brass inside. Interesting. Okay. Are we looking at do we have a lamp? Are we interested? Are we learning about a brass lamp? Not necessarily, but in doing this research of how do we identify an old lamp, this is good information to know. What do the numbers on a bulb mean? Okay, I don't know if I'm not going to open that, but does that mean wattage? I don't know. Look at this. I think this is where you and I will find a lot of bread and butter items. How do we tell if a lamp is mid-century? Mid-century is critical, like mid-century architecture, furniture and textiles. Lamps from this period have a geometric shape, simple lines, space age feel, George Jetson type of feel. All those ugly 60s things. I don't know. Think of Laugh-In or something like that. Look for shapes such as globes, hourglasses, and rings to kickstart your search. So, okay, interesting. We can learn from that. What can you do with old lamps? Well, you can sell them. How do you know if a lamp is a stifle? I don't know. Stifle lamps contain a foil signature decal on the bottom of the lamps. Look for Stifle Lamp Company, SLC, or Stifle or Stifle. Well, duh. Okay. And we're just kind of looking through this. Now, I think this is interesting. How do you date a lamp by the plug? Or can you? In an electric lamp, which is what we're talking about. By the way, old kerosene types of lamps are certainly valuable. You always want to look at those, but we're not talking about those. Generally, I'm implying electric lamps here. The cord often reveals clues to the lamp's age. This is information we should know, not just for lamps, but for other electrical items we run across, like an old electric fan. Unless the cord has been replaced, they often have been. We'd rather they not be. Inspect the cord. If it looks old, it probably is. The metal prongs on the plug are likely the same size rather than one being larger than the other. Okay. And there is going to be more information if you were to click this and read it. Like, is it a cloth cord? Cloth cords were out before we had rubber insulation on cords, and you'll learn about that. You'll learn about how to date from the plug itself. Again, what is a mid-century lamp? I guess that's the very same thing we looked at. Okay, a lot of these are just a repeat. That's fine. Okay, 8 tips for identifying an antique lamp. This is an interesting article. Do some research. Visit antique websites. Look for a maker's mark. I think visiting antique websites doesn't help you. You've got a lamp, you want to find it. Look for a maker's mark. Okay, but we learned that before. Research makers, examine the cord. If a lamp is electric, examine the cord. A giveaway is a cotton wrap cord. I just said that, which indicates an antique. Not always. An antique, they still had cloth cotton wrap cords in the 40s and maybe the 50s for some things. Likewise, an antique electrical cords, the prongs were the same size. Okay. Likewise, you may see screws or even wires around the plugs. Look for a brass collar. Yeah, that's for kerosene lamp. And so on. Shade designs. If you think you might have a Tiffany, well, you know to look for that. Tiffany lamps include wisteria, dragonfly, nautilus, and lily, and so on. Examine the craftsmanship. Let's look at one more. This article, Banter, How to Identify Vintage Lamps, 7 Steps. Well, it's easy to identify a vintage lamp that's just over 20 years old, but you know what they mean. How to identify an old lamp. And these are just some little tips in here. More of the same. Decals. If a lamp looks new in every way, shiny metal and all of that, then it may be a reproduction. We should always keep our eyes out for reproductions on anything that we're looking at. Retro is in, and it often is in different categories. If something looks retro, but it just feels nice and new, and it probably is a reproduction. We have to know that. A reproduction might be worth some money, but we don't want to misrepresent something like that. All right. All of this really didn't have to do with lamps. It could be any topic whatsoever. How do you identify something weird? You ask Google. Or I'm going to a garage sale. Look on Facebook for your local garage sales, Facebook groups and Nextdoor and apps like that to find garage sales. And if it says lamps, we have a lot of old lamps, you probably want to do a little research on old lamps. How do you do that? You type into Google, how to identify an old lamp. What if it says old, I don't know, old electric fans? Well, you type into Google, how do I identify an electric fan? Now, on the fan, it's almost always going to have a brand, so you'll be able to kind of narrow it down. But once you get a brand, what do you look for? What if the plate is missing underneath and you don't have any model number, any year? How do you know what it is? You Google it. Don't forget to ask Google, how do I find something? It's very good information.